Dave Giordano, welcome to the podcast. Good to have you here.
Great to be here, Mike. Always fun to talk to you.
Hey, so we were talking about your experience and, frankly, wild success in developing and hiring people. And I know that a lot of companies I know in our space and in the technology services world, finding people is really, really hard. And you did it well enough for 25 years, then had a great exit in 2020. And just wanted to hear your thoughts on that topic. We've talked about it a little bit. And maybe we start with, where you started at Accenture and what you learned there, and then we'll take it through to what you ended up doing in TSG.
Yeah, I think my great conversation, right? As far as finding, good people, it is, I think it's the crux of consulting, right? Is good people help you sell good clients, help you sell good jobs. Where do you find those people, especially in a competitive market, and how can you create a repeatable, recruiting and retention machine instead of spending a lot of cycles on constantly the recruiting and retention issues. So
Yeah.
I think a lot of my background. So I came out of Northern Illinois with computer science and accounting background in 1986. So it's pretty gray. But
I'm not going to judge you, by the way.
Yeah, well, you're great too.
Yeah.
But understand, 1986. It's an interesting time because definitely computers were flourishing, but most of the B2B work was all mainframe based, and it was kind of before the geek revolution of the 90s of the computers. So when I started at what used to be Anderson Consulting and is now has become Accenture, and back then, we hired 250 people for just the Chicago office, and I'm not sure what the numbers were worldwide. Chicago was one of the bigger offices. I'm sure New York was hiring the same. And, given the infancy of computer science and the mainframe computing environment, Accenture could not hire, just computer science grads. They had to hire good people and really focus on a hire and train. So I came in with computer science, so I kind of thought I had a little bit of a leg up. But, in my start group were QBA grads from Indiana, were finance grads from U of I, along with some data processing one as well. So what Accenture did and what I, kind of learned was we went through 2 weeks of training in the office and then 3 weeks of training in St. Charles, which was, it said 9 to 5, but it was 9 to 10 at night. But the experience that I had of that bonding with those, I had 13 people in my start group, and yet they started 250. Those are some of my best friends to this date. We worked on projects together. You talk about that ability of bonding, people as coworkers and friends.
Sure.
I met my wife Melissa through the best friend of a girl in my start group. I, introduced another guy in my start group to his wife who worked with me at a project, and I was best man at their wedding. So it's not just they were taking inexperienced people and training them to do this new thing, which was computer science and mainframe programming stuff, but it's also they were bonding them to the firm. And
that St. Charles was that's kind of like the Anderson U, right? I mean, that's a very formalized process. And I'm curious, any more about that? Like, what about that was really memorable from like a process and how they handled themselves?
Well, I think and we'll get into it when we talk about Inexperience, folks. Was in one way, it's really efficient to say instead of hiring people one at a time, and then when they come on board, somebody's got to figure out how to get them up to speed with what we do. Especially, for a technology services group, we were in this niche that was ECM. Nobody was, not many people came in knowing what we did. And at Accenture, it wasn't just about knowing what we're going to do, but it was also very much of a bonding yourself to the way that the company works. And let's be honest, from a retention side, I was there for 9 years. It's hard to leave a place that helped grow you and where all your friends are. And that and it makes work more fun. So I think I grew up with that kind of mentality from an Accenture side. And when I founded TSG after working, I left Accenture, worked for 6 months at just a body shop that would hire anybody anytime and place them anywhere. One of the things I wanted to bring to TSG was, this inexperienced hiring from college. And, we started that in 1998, just 2 years after. I think Andrew was our first college hire. Sarah was one of our first interns that year, where we started bringing in, these inexperienced people from college, and the benefits of the energy and the bonding with the team was just something that we found, it just made work more fun. And some of those people, I think George was with me for 20 years as far as one of our college hires. So, that piece, I'm pretty passionate about that, hey, when it comes to folks looking for a way to energize and to establish their culture, inexperienced folks that you train to do the things you want to do it, which was an Anderson thing, is one thing that should be, in your quiver of arrows to try.
Yeah. Well, it's funny, and as you talk about it, that sort of cohort idea of having been through something together is really interesting. I know my schooling experience, my college friends are still my college friends.
Right.
I didn't have a formal job equivalent, but when I think about some of the teams in my company now, we think about this group of 3 or 4 people as the 2018 people, and these people as the 2019 people, et cetera. And I think that having come in together, they remember the same sort of ramp up and process build up. We haven't done it as deliberately as you did, and I think as we continue this conversation, hearing more about your process, how you went and found and even identified a handful of schools and all that, I think that's really interesting.
Well, I think that the part of the bonding side, and let's make sure to talk about that, is because bonding as well as training efficiency, right? So the idea that we would hire folks most of the time that graduated in May from college, and we would start them in September. And we kind of evolved to that because, hey, it's so much nicer to start, working at a new company, especially your first job, with other people that are starting your first job. Just the ebb and flow of consulting, we always have our biggest months in October, November, December. So if we start them in September and train them up, we can have them available for October, November, and December. But also, for some of them, these are millennials, and you've heard me in the meetings. Anytime somebody says, "I just wish people were more like me," they're not. And some of the appeal of folks of, hey, I want my last summer to travel or do whatever else after this 4-year journey of college.
Sure.
Why not encourage that? And some of the folks we would give pay advances. Because I was like, get that out of your system as far as, if you're going to go to, well, not in COVID times here, but if you're going to go for a month in Asia or 2 months in Europe, go do it now. We'll even help you, with some of the...
that does get harder to do as you get older and all the things about
really
life.
Hard. You can do it in consulting. I've always said a leave of absence in consulting is one of the rare things we can do, but it's harder to stay on track with the rest of your, group. But we would start them all in September, and then it'd be a group of 7 to 10 folks. And I think what's really hard for folks that own consulting firms or other stuff is wait a minute, that's my September payroll is going to be a lot higher,
right.
And I'm not going to have the billing to reflect it. But I would say consistently, because we had the summer to prep. Okay, hey, we got to sell a lot more work that starts in October. We would see those people profitable in the second month. And so, the money works, but you got to commit, it's a 3-year journey, right?
Yeah.
And you got to commit to going to school to hire the next year, so that the people that you hire can talk to the other people, because I would still say, even with college hiring, referrals are always going to be your number one way to get people in. And what's better than someone who likes working for you talking to their classmates from the year before?
Well, so an average TSG class is what, 6 to 8 people, something like that?
We were doing 7 to 10.
Okay, 7 to 10. So let's walk it backwards. So 7 to 10, happy new hires start in September, October. What happened leading up to that? What are the steps you guys were taking?
So, and this is the weird part. In September, a year before that, we would go on campus recruiting and we kind of ended up focused on, we've always had some success at Purdue and Notre Dame. We kind of branched out to Michigan and Michigan State. I think those are kind of the secrets of. Sometimes we would lose folks from like we do hire from Illinois, but we'd lose Illinois folks to Silicon Valley. A lot of times, the Michigan and Michigan State ones were really successful from competing against Detroit isn't as hard as competing against maybe Indianapolis. And then we would have some small ones. We had a lot of luck with DePaul with a W. As well as Bradley, as well. Some great recruits from there. We never, we kind of stayed away from Northwestern or Wisconsin. We tried a little bit at Marquette. But we typically get an alumni that would say, hey, I want to own my school and I want to hire folks from there. And we would delegate it to them because they'd be, hey, I want to get more people from.
Be excited about it too, right?
And they'd be excited about it. Yeah.
And so, what's I like there's obviously the strategy behind looking at where they're, you're skiing to where the snow is as opposed to looking for the trees. Like there's opportunity at Michigan because maybe there's not as many people, which surprises me a little bit, but I could see how
I would say
a lot more in Indiana.
There's folks in Michigan that want to work in Chicago. So we would have from our recruiting side, we would really focus on what we called the 3 C's because we were evolved to, hey, we need to see computer science. And, so from a computer science perspective, the nice part about, inexperienced college recruiting is you have a transcript. Anybody else can bluff their way through what they did for a job, a coding test, all that other stuff sometimes isn't as good as, well, wait a minute, what kind of grades did you get over this 3-month period? So, we would say computer science, and from the schools that we're going to, we'd have a rough idea. We'd look for, I always tell people I'd look for A's in your programming classes. This is what we're paying you to do. We want to see that you're good at it, right? And then we would have Chicago was the second C, was we were looking for folks that were excited about wanting to be in Chicago. Because sometimes you get, especially Notre Dame, I think that has much more of a national recruiting class, you get the, hey, I'd love to try Chicago, but my family's on the East Coast and I'm going to move there. And we were like, we wanted people that, hey, I want to go to a big city. My family, whether it's in some of the surrounding states around Chicago or that, hey, they were excited about Chicago. And then the last one was culture, and I kind of think this was our secret sauce was, we got to the point where we would ask the question of, hey, if you went to lunch with this person, on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being a really interesting lunch and 1 being a very boring lunch, how would you rate them? And, to kind of, we're consultants, we kind of want to weed out a little bit of the antisocial side of it, especially because we're working in teams. So on campus, we would do, this kind of grading and then decide, if we're going to hire 7 to 10, typically we try to bring in 20 plus people into the office for the second series of office interviews. Just figuring that we might not like everybody we bring in, that was rare, but not everybody is going to accept with us, right?
It's interesting. You bring up the point about, in consulting, there's a lot of, you need to be a good communicator, with people. And I always put the focus on, because you'll be talking to clients maybe more because there's always a new project, there's always a new team, but on the flip side of that, you might be shuffled around to different teams, and you might have worked at our company for a while and really never worked with that person over there, and you're always remaking that every whatever the time frame is, 3 to 6 in a month or something.
Well, I think it's client side communications, but you want a good team, right? And we want a culture where people enjoy working with each other. And what's a better example than did you enjoy lunch with this person, right? And you'd be surprised how effective that is. I think the other secret thing that, now that I'm not running it, I can share from a recruiting side was we would do the night before the office interview. So typically, whether it's 10 people or whatever we'd have we'd say, hey, we want you to come the night before. We're going to send you out to dinner and an event with mostly, the inexperienced people. So folks that have either been here a year or two, maybe 3 years at the most, to kind of get a feel for who we are. Because you think about it, when you bring them into the office, we're in sales mode. Yeah. Right? For most of these people, they checked all the boxes. Hey, let's show them what we're about. And we got a lot of great feedback from our recruits that was the thing that from the ones that accepted,
really?
That was the thing that differentiated them was, hey, they got a feel for what it was like to work here. Mm-hmm. I would tell you the same thing from our side is from that culture side, we'd get feedback, hey, what did you think of these guys? Because it's really hard. I think we sent them bowling most of the time. It's really hard to fake dinner and bowling like you could fake a 40-minute interview.
Yeah, sure.
And so, just that culture part of, hey, are because we want those first years folks to say, hey, I want that person as part of my team. Right.
Yeah, I'm curious, on the training side, how did you successfully navigate what's called I don't know if it's a skills gap, but like we always find that, even coming out of college, there's actually kind of still a pretty far journey to be really effective in the kind of work that we do. So what were the kinds of things, how did you get that new cohort in and up to speed on what you do? Because you mentioned like ECM is kind of niche, certainly not a class about it in school. How were you successful getting them up to speed?
Well, I think this is another advantage of not starting till September. So, some of the smaller schools, so Bradley and DePauw would be an easy one, an example of they don't necessarily have the curriculum of, say, a University of Illinois or a Michigan. But what we would say was, but then again, they're teaching stuff that that was, industry leading 2 years ago. What we would give for the folks over the summer is we would say, look, here's the stuff we think you should do on your own. This is, whether your college course taught it or not, here's the stuff that you need to know for us. And, and if you're worried about, competing against these folks from these other programs, here's the training. We would give them some, unpaid self-training that we looked at as augmenting their college experience that they could do over the summer. Mm-hmm. And, for the ones from the less intense computer schools, hey, could you pick that up and be ready for us in September? And I got one good story, and if she watches it, Pam can send me a note. But I interviewed someone, we had a class about 7. We had some room for people in the fall. And I interviewed someone in May who was had been graduated for a year, I think, from Michigan State and was an industrial engineer. And, the story she was saying was, hey, I was working as an industrial engineer in a food processing plant in Iowa. Yeah. That's not, working the midnight shift. This isn't what I thought I'd be doing.
Yeah, sure.
And you can't not, and this is an Accenture thing, you can't not look at a industrial engineer and say, the brain power, the horsepower is not there. We said, hey, look, we'll bring you on. Here's the courses you need to do over the self-training courses you need to do over the summer. And you got to take this serious. You have to do these things. And, Pam killed it, right? From a industrial engineer, I think she was with us a couple of years, left, went to Spring CM, left there, went to Google, went back to Spring CM. I think she's now, a VP. That ability to take that chance on her, I think she appreciated us taking the chance on her. And we're looking, I don't want just your college to train you. I want you to keep an interest in, learning and that ability to learn once you get to us. But then we would, for her, then she started with the group of the other 8, bonded with all of them. Yeah. And then we sent them through typically 2.5 weeks of specific training. And I think from a culture side, we would divide that up between 10 different people.
Yeah.
So these people would not only get exposed to the things they need to learn, but we'd have different people teaching each one of the courses so that they get exposed to the other people they could be working with once they're done.
Yeah, it's funny because as you're saying that, I know I'm a little hesitant to ask people to, spend a summer unpaid getting ramped up for us, but we've noticed that, really a lot of the development work for yourself, developing your own skills, while we can give you a lot, in the office, the people that really excel are the ones, to your point, that just want to keep learning and they're going to do it on their own. And there's a balance between, we can help you, we can show you the path, but a lot of that work, I mean, you can go at any school, and if you don't do the work or you do the work, it's all on you if it sticks and you can do something.
Well,
with
I think Notre Dame's a great example. It's not like there's not a gazillion smart people at Notre Dame. The last time I think we hired, they're still teaching C++.
Right.
Right, which is a great base level, but it's not what we needed from a Java and JavaScript, Ruby, whatever,
Right.
Angular, whatever else you want, so, and it's not like we're having them take these courses and take tests, or you have to come Java certified or something like that.
Yeah, yeah.
It's saying, what I think George would do would be a really good, here's the pieces we need you to learn and understand.
Yeah.
And then still you're going to be in the office for another 2.5 weeks of
Right.
learning it. And then, Mike, we've talked about it. Then it's the staffing side of it, of where everything we do revolves around staffing. Hey, given that everybody in the company now knows these 7 people, what would be the best place to staff them? Hey, the kids that are killing it, okay, let's put them on the harder jobs. The kids that aren't, and I say kids, but the college recruits, the kids that aren't, let's put them on the job where they can continue to learn more.
Yeah.
And not stress them out, maybe, and that's where our software came into play. Not stress them out with a client engagement that's due 2 weeks from now.
Right.
We expect X, Y, Z.
Maybe as a final point, the part that's, I think, the real mystery to me, and maybe if people are listening to this and interested, okay, this college thing sounds interesting. Can you talk a little bit how you, the process of, selecting a college, say it's DePauw or whoever, one of your cohorts, and approaching the admission, I don't even know what the role is. Here I am, kind of fumbling for it. How did you get into that? Make the relationships, job fairs, whatever that stuff is. Let's talk about that and how you.
Well, and a lot of times your recent grads will know who to contact, right? I went through the job program. We had Ray really knew Iowa State when we used to recruit from Iowa State. But the colleges want to make it easy for you, and especially in this COVID time. The career fairs last fall were all virtual. I would think they're probably going to be mostly virtual.
Yeah,
this
probably.
Fall.
Yeah.
So you can just look at and say, oh, look, so I can pick. Hey, where are my people from? And I think, Mike, this is the point where you get, hey, who wants to help us recruit more people from their colleges?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right, and really, push those people. The other thing is, we talked about referrals are always the best thing.
Yeah.
It's not too late to get interns for the summer, right? This is, last year we were looking and we saw so many people canceled their internships because of COVID. I would expect there's not only recent college grads that would take an internship as well as juniors that would take an internship if you can do it for them. And, what was a real breaker for us was, hey, those are recruiters for you on campus.
Yeah,
fall.
sure.
So, picking a school. So say it's University of Illinois, and hey, let's hire an intern who fits the profile of the people that we would like to recruit. So probably a little bit more outgoing, but smart. Diversity, if you can get it. I always tell people in '86 we were 40% female at Accenture, kind of with Melinda Gates, who's in the news now, of, hey, pre the computer geek revolution in the 90s, it was that. But you could get some diversity in an intern. And then not only can you possibly hire that person for the following year, but you can try them out for the summer, and they go back and refer you to their friends. Hey, you should interview with Caxi. Here's why. I really enjoyed it over the summer.
Yeah. And this is a really dumb question, but like, what's the title of the office you call to start that journey to figure out how
Placement.
Placement? Okay.
It's the placement. Yeah.
Yeah.
And just they want a little bit of money from the career fair, but most of the time, they are anxious to get their students. Michigan State is one that my daughter's at, that I have a relationship with the Keystone or the Capstone guy.
Mm-hmm.
Very anxious to get their guys
Yeah,
placed
I bet. Sure,
in
that
good
makes sense.
places, because that helps them, with their programs. And I thought we just did really well with so many good Michigan State and Michigan folks over time that just, hey, I want to get to Chicago, but I don't want to leave the Midwest.
Right. Hey, well, listen, this has been terrific, very informative. I think lots of people listening are at least curious about next steps. So thanks for kind of priming the pump for thinking about hiring and training in a different way.
Yeah, it's good. And I get, Mike, it's probably more for the other peers like yourself out there. But I do think it relates to companies as well, of just that, back in that commitment of, hey, can I hire and train folks, and giving me a different way. Even if they come in with lots of experience, shouldn't I put them through some training to get those cultural benefits?
That's great. Hey, well, thanks. Good chatting with you. Talk to you soon.
All right. Thanks, Mike.
You made it all the way to the end. Thanks. Don't forget to subscribe and like this video to hear more content just like this.